It is Sunday the 19th of December 2021. I'm at the Unitarian Church of Montreal. I'm just starting up my peaceful public protest against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which includes, amongst other things, sexual abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist religious educators. That's the word that Unitarian Universalists use to describe what otherwise would be known as Sunday school teachers, and prominent Unitarian Universalist lay leaders. But it's not just the sexual abuse that's the problem, because any community with, so many thousands of members is going to have a certain number of pedophiles and rapists and so on in its midst. The problem that I'm protesting about is the mishandling and the cover-up and denial of clergy sex abuse when it occurs. The Unitarian Universalist Association has tried to cover up and even officially deny the sexual abuse of children even after Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers and prominent Unitarian Universalist lay people have been charged, tried, and convicted of sexual abuse of children, including forcible rape of children, unnatural rape of children. That's a term that was used in one of the cases. Sodomy is another term that was used in one of the cases. So serious sexual abuse of children, including the rape of children. Unitarian Universalist ministers, Sunday school teachers, lay leaders have been charged, tried, and convicted of these crimes, sent to jail for these crimes, and yet, even after they've been sent to jail, the Unitarian Universalist Association and other Unitarian Universalists, a lot of Unitarian Universalist ministers, have tried to cover up and hide this. The UUA Board of Trustees even officially denied the sexual abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers in what was supposed to be an official apology for clergy sexual misconduct. During the 2014 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, UUA moderator Jim Key inserted into the middle of his moderator's report what was ostensibly an official apology by the UUA Board of Trustees for clergy sexual misconduct. And this was a second official apology. The previous one had been delivered by the UUA administration in 2000. So this is like 14 years later. The UUA Board of Trustees delivered a second apology, or so-called apology, because the first one proved to be effectively worthless. The apology itself wasn't a bad apology. It was actually, I'd say, a reasonably good apology. But the problem is that the UUA did not live up to its promises to do better in the intervening 14 years. They continued to mishandle clergy sexual misconduct. They continued to cover up and deny clergy sexual misconduct, and so on. So essentially, that's the reason for the second apology in 2014 was because the first one, even though on the surface it was not a bad apology, was made worthless by the failure of the Unitarian Universalist Association and individual Unitarian Universalist congregations to properly handle clergy misconduct, clergy sexual misconduct specifically, in the years following that apology. Part of that failure would be the Unitarian Universalist Association falsely accusing me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel in June of 2012 in an effort to intimidate me into taking down the Emerson Avenger blog posts that told the readily verifiable truth about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers and First Parish Norwell parishioner Richard Buell. In fact, I had not blogged about any pedophile Unitarian Universalist other than Richard Buell. I was aware of some pedophilia committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, but I decided to hang on to that. I decided not to deal with that issue publicly for various reasons. So I did not actually name any Unitarian Universalist minister as being a pedophile per se. I did blog about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, who was convicted of raping a teenage Tibetan refugee, but she was at the youngest 15, but generally speaking they say 16, when he lured her away from her family in India. He promised the family that he would take good care of their daughter. You know, if they gave their teenage daughter into his hands, he would take her to America, and he would, make sure that she got a proper education and so on and so forth. Essentially, he would adopt their daughter and make sure that she got a good education. Well, she got an education all right. She ended up being a sex slave for a good number of years. She didn't even manage to escape his clutches until she was in her early 20s. So for at least 4, maybe 5 years, this teenage Tibetan refugee was essentially Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's sex slave. And he was eventually charged, tried, and convicted, sentenced to jail term. Went to jail, spent a few years in jail, not that many considering the seriousness of his crime. I think he was released from prison after about a 4-year jail term, possibly even less. I've seen some reports where he only spent 3 years in jail. This is for repeatedly raping a teenage Tibetan refugee, essentially kidnapping her, luring her away from her family with promises of a better life in America, and yet, at most, he spent 4 years in jail. Yes, he had I think a 10 to 20-year sentence handed down, but most of that sentence was a suspended sentence. So essentially he was released, and that was that. So anyway, getting back to that, in 2012, June 2012, so more than 2 years before the Unitarian Universalist Association delivered its second apology for clergy sexual misconduct, I was falsely accused of blasphemous libel for blogging about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell. Both of these cases I blogged about partly because Unitarian Universalists were trying to keep this hidden. They were trying to, keep it out of the public eye. So I made sure it was in the public eye by blogging about it. So that's it. In 2012, this is one of the most egregious attempts by the Unitarian Universalist Association to conceal very serious sexual abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Sunday school teachers and so on. So that's it. Just over 2 years before the apology, because this was Friday, June 1st of 2012, when I was had that cease and desist demand letter end up in my email inbox. A few weeks later, I picked it up from a bailiff's office. I got the actual paper document. So basically June of 2012, and then 2 years later, the UUA Board of Trustees, as I said, they delivered what was supposed to be an official apology for clergy sexual misconduct at the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So this is an annual general meeting. It happens in June around the summer solstice, and essentially you have thousands of Unitarian Universalists flocking to one or another major North American city for their annual convention. And they have voting on various things and so on and so forth. And so every year the president makes a report, the moderator makes a report, various other officials make reports. And so Jim Key, James See No Evil Key, I like to call him. His middle initial is C, and he definitely saw no evil in some ways. So I like to refer to him as Jim See No Evil Key. He literally lied about the sexual abuse of children in his so-called apology for clergy sexual misconduct. His exact words, if I remember correctly, were, "There were no incidents of abuse of elders or children in my investigation." So essentially, he's saying that he personally investigated Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct, and in his investigations he found no evidence of any abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers. This is a brazen lie. I personally told Jim Key in 2013 about the Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell case. At minimum, he knew about the Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell case, and there were other cases. There was a case that I did not speak to Jim Key about, because like I said, I like to hold some things in reserve. You know, I am trying to get the Unitarian Universalist Association to publicly disclose the whole story in terms of sexual abuse in general and sexual abuse of children in particular. And I want to be able to challenge them if they don't fully disclose. You know, there's cases I know of, and if they make a disclosure and those cases aren't included in that disclosure, then I'm going to say, hey, wait a minute, what about this and what about that? And we're actually, to some degree, we're already in that situation, because the Unitarian Universalist Association's Ministerial Fellowship Committee, this is the subcommittee of the UA Board of Trustees, which is supposed to discipline ministers for misconduct. Just recently, I don't know exactly when, but I'd say within the last year or so, they published an official list of ministers who were either what they call defellowshipped by the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, essentially stripped of their fellowship as a Unitarian Universalist minister with the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, or who resigned while they were being investigated for misconduct. Well, there's a few names missing there, including a couple of names that it's about sexual misconduct as opposed to non-sexual misconduct. There's one name there, I should say there's one name not there, that's a case of non-sexual misconduct, which I believe the minister was actually defellowshipped. I certainly got the impression that this minister, who was accused of plagiarism, was in fact defellowshipped by the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and yet his name is not on the list of the ministers who were defellowshipped, and it's not on the list of the ministers who resigned while they were under investigation. It's just not there at all. And as I said, there's some other names in terms of sexual misconduct that I don't see there. So I'm going to have to look into that. But that's one of the reasons why I didn't blog about this case that I'm talking about. The other case of sexual abuse of children that I knew quite a bit about, and that where the minister was charged, tried, and convicted and went to jail. You know, not every case of sexual abuse of a criminal nature actually goes to trial. You know, there's ministers who aren't arrested. There's ministers who aren't charged. You know, so they never even go to trial. So there are such cases, but in terms of Unitarian Universalist ministers who I'm aware of, who were charged, tried, convicted, sentenced to jail terms, there was one minister and one church, obviously, that I barely spoke about. I might have dropped a couple of hints that I was aware about it here and there, but I didn't go into any kind of detail. Well, his name is on that list. As I said, I just came across this list in the last few months. It was actually as a result of running a search on Mac Wallace, or I think just Mac Mitchell. I think I ran a search on just Mac Mitchell and rape, those three words, to see what came up. You know, I wanted to see where my blog post came up in the search result. I wanted to see if there's any blog posts, you know, that I was unaware of previously and so on. And in running that search, this Unitarian Universalist Association webpage did come up, which I had not seen before. And it's quite clear that it's quite recent, because I think there was a 2021 date on it. So I don't believe it was put on the internet prior to 2021. I'm just going to make sure that this camera is still recording. And yes, it is, and we still got a few minutes of recording time left. So I'm probably going to wrap up this segment soon and just start circulating. I don't see a lot of people coming to the church this morning. It's possible that they decided to stop having people come to the church because of the new COVID-19 situation with the new Omicron variant that's highly contagious. It's possible that they decided not to have people come into church today. I don't know. I saw one person come out of the church, but that was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the husband of Reverend Diane Rollert, David Rollert, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's who came out of the church. So anyway, getting back to things, and we'll wrap this up quickly because we're running out of time here. That case was recently disclosed, and so I will be blogging about it in some detail. But that's the thing, is these are two ministers named who are charged, tried, and convicted of the sexual abuse of children in this official list of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and yet UUA moderator Jim Key officially denied any sexual abuse of children in 2014, even though these ministers were charged, tried, and convicted and sentenced to jail terms in the 1980s and 1990s. So that's just a brazen lie on the part of Jim Key. And I see we still have a little bit of time left. So we'll wrap it up by just saying that that we'll continue on with this, but there's no question at all, that the UUA Board of Trustees, as a group, brazenly lied about the sexual abuse of children, specifically in what I consider to be a worthless apology for clergy sexual misconduct that was delivered at the 2014 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association.